Many of us said to our Maker, as we understood him, that's key, right? As we understood him, it's your God, not mine. I said to my God, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. If you're listening to this, right, and you're feeling desperate, right, you can go back a few seconds and say that prayer with me. As I recite that, you think about it yourself. And when I say that prayer, I think to myself, like, I'm willing to have another experience. I'm willing to try something else. I'm willing to try to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Welcome to the Daily Reflection Podcast with your hosts Michael L. and Lee M. On this show, we try to provide inspiration through interviews with members of the recovery community. The show is not affiliated with any 12-step or recovery program, but you will hear them mentioned throughout the course of an interview. Today on the show, Chris P. from Reston, Virginia returns. Chris is sharing on the concept of the Keystone. Third step as the Keystone, the archway through which we pass. Great conversation with Chris. Before we get to the episode, if you're listening on YouTube, can I ask for a thumbs up? Maybe subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, can I ask you to give us a rating, a comment? Let us know what you think of the podcast. It's going to help us improve the show and expand our reach. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Good morning, Mike. How are you doing this morning?
I'm great, Lee. It's good to see you again. How are you?
I am great. It is March 14th, and what do we have in store for us today?
Well, we've got a return guest. It's Chris P. from Leesburg, Virginia. Welcome to the show, Chris. It's good to have you back on.
Thanks, Mike and Lee. Appreciate it.
So, Chris, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience in case they didn't catch your first episode, which I think was way back in January.
Sure. Chris, alcoholic from Leesburg, Virginia. And I got sober when I was 16 in 1989 and have been sober ever since.
Well, it's great to have you back on. We start the show in the same way every day. We ask the guest to read the reflection. And today we're talking about the Keystone. Do you have that handy?
I do. I have it right here. March 14th. The Keystone. He is the Father and we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arc through which we pass to freedom. Alcoholics Anonymous, page 62. A keystone is the wedge-shaped piece at the highest part of an arch that locks the other pieces in place. The other pieces are steps 1, 2, and 4 through 12. In one sense, this sounds like step 3 is the most important step, that the other 11 depend on the third for support. In reality, however, step 3 is just one of 12. It is the keystone, but without 11 other stones to build the base and arms, keystone or not, there will be no arch. Through daily working of all 12 steps, I find that triumphant arc waiting for me to pass through to another day of freedom.
Thanks for reading that, Chris. I like this passage, and I like the concept of step 3 being this archway that we step through to freedom. Tell me a little bit how that resonates with you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. This is a great reading, and this reading comes out of the third step in the Big Book. And I read this for a long time on a daily basis. Just after the what we read in meetings often, how it works when it gets to the ABCs, where just after that it begins to talk about the third step. And probably my favorite part is that right before this, it talks about so our troubles we think are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and it begins to describe self-will run riot. And it's one of the first promises for me in the book, because what it means is that I don't need to wait for other people to actually make changes in my life. Things can begin to happen, and I can begin to make some changes. And so, as we get into this next part where the reading came out, tells us exactly how to go about kind of turning our will and life over to the care of God. And it says, first of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director, and it goes into that reading, which is just, just absolutely wonderful. And so for me, I can remember when back in 1989, I was early 90. I was laying on I was living at home. I was totally depressed. I was a teenage alcoholic. Alcohol and drugs was killing me. I'd been kicked out of school. I'd spent 2 years in drug rehab. Got out of that drug rehab with almost 11 months of sobriety after being in there for almost 2 years. And so I knew I was going to drink again. I was totally depressed, and I was laying on the floor of my parents' house, and I heard a voice. And I was struggling because I knew self-will ran riot, right? And I knew that the decisions that I had been making were killing me. I heard this voice, and the voice said, "You focus on staying sober, Chris. I will take care of everything else." And I can remember feeling this peace come over me, associated with kind of taking the third step, right, moving into the next realm of sobriety, and anyway. Step 3 has been a huge part of my life, and it's been just, having a new director and having a new experience is fantastic.
I think that's such a powerful story, and for that kind of a message to come to someone so young in a way that, you would listen to it is kind of miraculous if you think about it. In the reflection, it says, in one sense, this sounds like step 3 is the most important step, and that all of the other steps really aren't as important as step 3. And it goes on to talk about that more. But what do you think about that? Do you think it's the most important step?
I don't. I do think it's critical, but there's all the steps are important, right? We discuss that often, and in the very beginning of There's a Solution, as we talk about this Keystone, and There's a Solution, it talks about the cement that binds us together as alcoholics. And so I come to realize that I'm not alone in step 1, and that I have a problem, that I'm powerless over that. And then what I like about these building things is that then the next, in step 2, it talks about the cornerstone, just having willingness in step 2 to believe in a power greater than ourselves is a cornerstone in which we can start to build this spiritual structure, right? Which back in 1989 was a far cry from anything I could have ever dreamed of. I was, totally desperate just to get off of alcohol, and didn't see a solution to that. And so then as we move into step 3, turning that over, just began to take hold. Just after that reading, it actually says the third step prayer. If you all don't mind, I'm just going to recite it. So I think it's important to this reading. This is how it goes. And I've said this prayer many times, hundreds and hundreds of times. I've said this prayer on my knees, desperate. And I've said it not desperate with my friends, guys I've sponsored in AA. And so this is what it goes. Many of us said to our Maker as we understood Him. That's key, right? As we understood Him, it's your God, not mine. I said to my God, God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. And so if you're listening to this, right, and you're feeling desperate, right, you can go back a few seconds and say that prayer with me. As I recite that, you think about it yourself. And when I say that prayer, I think to myself, like, I'm willing to have another experience. I'm willing to try something else. I'm willing to try to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Right? I'm willing to give my new AA sponsor a call I'm willing to, if I don't have a sponsor and I've heard about getting a sponsor, I'm gonna make a call. I'm gonna reach out to the person in the meeting who I think has something that I want, and I'm gonna ask them, hey, will you sponsor me? It's about having a new experience.
Those are great suggestions, Chris, especially for the newcomer. You were quite young when you experienced that, hearing that voice. How long had you been separated from alcohol when you had that experience?
Probably a year and a few months, not long. But I'd been doing step 3. Yeah, I'd been doing step 3 all along, and trying, and been praying on my knees every day. Listening to hear something, and it talks in the reading about this walking through to the. How does it say? It says, "I find that triumphant arc waiting for me to pass through another day of freedom." And I mean, how often have I had the craving to drink and use again? I mean, just all the time, right? Over the last 30 plus years that I've been sober, many a days where I have felt the compulsion to drink and use again. And when I'm able to turn my will and my life over and hold steady, I walk through that pathway that they've described to freedom, right? Because I haven't put it in my mouth. I didn't succumb to the temptation, which is difficult.
Does God remove your difficulties? And, how does that work for you?
So earlier in the reading of step 3, it actually talks about that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our problem, and that we can't remove that on our own. And so, I have found more success in allowing God to remove it from me and asking for it to be removed than I have by trying to force my successes onto the situation at hand.
Something that was really essential in my recovery was getting to a point where I found the willingness to do some of these things, reaching out and trusting in something that I didn't quite understand. It sounds like you were at that place as well, that jumping off point. What do you tell the newcomer that feels like maybe they haven't hit their bottom?
Well, that's a great question. Since I got sober young, the second half of the big book has a whole list of stories that talk about people where the bottom wasn't a house on fire scenario. And so if you're new and trying to identify with whether or not you're an alcoholic or not, there's some stories in the book that you can read and try to relate to. The question, is on a daily basis, am I willing to turn my will and my life over? So it's am I hitting bottom in the beginning, which is critical. But I've hit many bottoms over the years that I've been sober, and come into very difficult times. And I gained some solace by reflecting back on when I did the third step, and I turned my will and my life over as diligently as I possibly could, and that I asked God to remove those difficulties from me. And then when I heard the voice, it said, I'll take care of everything else. The life that I've been given in Alcoholics Anonymous, even through the hard times, has been absolutely spectacular. It's now time to be thankful for the opportunity to go through the struggles, right? And to know that I can do those hard things in AA, and I can be sober, and I can carry the message to my friends, and I can be a good father, a son, a husband. That those things are absolutely important. I was laughing. I did a video cast a while back that talked about and I talked about the third step, and I was reviewing that at some point here recently, and I said, as I look back on things, it has worked out. And I said, if you asked my parents, as they looked back on my life, they would also say it's worked out, right? being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and following the 12 steps has been just absolutely fantastic, because, it looked like the road was going to be short for their son. That's for sure.
The program is so powerful. It certainly helped me with my main problem at the time, that was drinking, but it's also helped me with relationships. And it sounds like that's the case for you as well. How else has the program changed your life today?
I love this. At the very end of a book in the AA book, of a chapter in the AA book, is called A Vision for You. At the very end, it talks about trudging the road to happy destiny. And I was talking with a friend a few weeks ago, and he was talking about needing help, and I said, well, when I started, I also need help, and I said, we stand on each other's shoulders. And that's just absolutely a wonderful thing. And so as we're not too cool to pray with one another and to walk with each other as we go through the difficult times, as we experience life together in AA meetings, or in one-on-one conversations that we're having with one another as we walk down that road, as we trudge the road to happy destiny, the most wonderful things begin to happen. And it is a fellowship in that having the camaraderie associated with trying to better myself with God's help is critical. It's just, I could cry randomly about it. I mean, just the gratitude I feel in my heart about the friendships and the support.
Does that happen to you? Do you get choked up? I know it certainly happens to me. I was just talking with Lee about that today. I just feel so moved.
All the time, all the time. I'm choked up a little bit right now. If I cut something short, it's coming on. It's coming on. It's starting to come on. The facts is that I'm filled with gratitude. I was a desperate, alcoholic, drug addict kid who I knew I was going to be dead before I was 30. And because I was reckless, and I was reckless in AA as well, but I didn't have the drugs and alcohol clouding my mind, and so thank God I was spared some things that were happening. But it's just been absolutely a wonderful ride, and I got all these quirky things that I do that I do out of habit now that I enforced back then, right? And so, I think it's important as I begin to try to have a new experience. Some of the things that people said was, if you normally brush your teeth with your right hand, right? Why don't you try brushing with your left hand for a minute, just to have a different experience? If you normally put your pajamas on, with your right foot forward, try doing it with your left foot, so that you can begin to think about the willingness to have a totally different experience. That if I'm used to reacting quickly about something, when somebody says something to me or offends me, maybe I can just keep my mouth shut just for a minute, so that I can try to have a different experience. When my boss or wife or somebody says something that I don't think is appropriate, maybe I just keep my mouth shut for a second, so that I can try to have a different experience. And it's amazing that those little things really begin to add up, and small changes really compound. Begin to have some good habits, like praying in the morning, and then as things got better. And as I read the reading, it also reminded me of this on page 98 in the 12 and 12, right before the St. Francis prayer. It says that prayer, meditation, and self-examination taken together creates a solid foundation for life, or something like that. That's what this does too, right? So that I start off with the third step, but as you mentioned that the other steps, right, help create that firm foundation for life that it describes, which has been, just absolutely wonderful.
Have you always felt comfortable praying, Chris?
No. I was terminally cool, which meant I'd have rather been on fire than prayed in front of somebody. And I had an experience when I was an adolescent, in a church setting, that I felt moved for a particular situation, and I couldn't raise my hand. And I went into the bathroom by myself, shut the door, and got on my knees at that point. And and then almost 5 years ago, I was in I began to take my children to church because I thought it was important for them. I continued to feel this need to raise my hand during worship, and I couldn't do it. There was 2,000 people in the sanctuary. Some of them had their hand raised, some of them didn't. Nobody cared whether I had my hand raised or not. I couldn't raise my hand. I would rather burst into flames than raise my hand. And at some point, at the time, I was in a step study with a bunch of guys, and we were doing a 4-step, and it had bothered me because I was unable to get outside my ego enough to raise my hand. I was even in the back of the church. It wasn't like I was in the front. I wasn't in the front of the church. I was in the very back. I told the guys after we had gone through the 5th or 6th step, I said, "Hey, look, the next time I feel like I feel moved to raise my hand in church, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna raise my hand. I'm gonna give you guys my word." We went around the room and they said, "Look, I don't care, Chris. I don't care if you raise your hand. They were totally ambivalent to any of that, right? But it was important. It was important to me. So the next time I was in church and felt this need to raise my hand, we have a band at church, and so they were playing a song, and it was a great song, and it was starting to climax, if you will, right? It was building, and I was feeling like raising my hand, and I had my hands as far into my pockets as I could go. I mean, they were almost in my socks. I have super long arms anyway, right? I'm 6'4" and have like a 37-inch sleeve. I mean, my arms are super long. Anyway, I got my hands totally down into my pants, and I'm feeling this calling, if you will, to raise my hand. And I told my friends in the AA that I was going to raise my hand. And so anyway, I stepped back away from my wife. She was in front of me. I stepped back away from my wife, and I just kind of slowly put my hand up, like I'm gonna. You guys can see it on the video, but anyway, I'm slowly putting my hand up, and I'll just tell you, this is my experience. It felt like my hand had gone through the ceiling and had actually reached up into heaven, and the feeling I got that came over me it was unbelievable. So then not only do I have my hand up, I'm crying, which is. It was just absolutely incredible, the feeling. And that's just more example of, like, if I can get out of my own way, if I can just get out of my own way, then I can experience the love that God has for me, which is deep.
Can you tell us a little bit about, the book tells us that we have a daily reprieve based on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And you've been doing this for a long, long time.
The daily practice starts off with usually I get on my knees in the morning and pray. That's what I do. So it starts off with a prayer. It starts off with oftentimes with an AA meeting. I like to do meetings early. I have a young family, and so I make time for AA in the morning so that I can be with my family in the afternoon, evening. And I spend a fair amount of time working the steps with other people and being available to do that. And when something bothers me, then I generally take it to the 4-step. I'll write about what it is. We'll discuss it. We'll come up with a solution, which usually involves prayer and some kind of other process to kind of work through whatever that difficulty is. Because for me, the power to change comes from the higher power that it talks about in step 2. And I take my problem, if you will, whatever that is, and get release from that through, working step 4, finding out what it is, admitting it to God, myself, to another human being in step 5, figuring out what the defect is with the counteracting asset, and then scripting a prayer that I begin to say in step 7 that helps to alleviate that. And I've just recently transitioned out of my job, and so I've been doing a lot of that recently. So it's been really exciting.
Is there anything else that you want to share with the audience before we wrap up?
I really want to invite you, if you haven't done step 3 and you don't have a sponsor, it's been wonderful for me to have done those things. If you haven't done it and you want to do it, go back to when I read that. Right, quiet yourself down before we start, and then just begin to say that prayer together. And think about me saying it with you, being there with you as you go through it. If you have a sponsor or you want to reach out to somebody else, then reach out to them and you can have them do it. I'll tell you, doing it with somebody else it's uncomfortable. It feels uncomfortable to sit next to somebody and sometimes hold hands or not. It's uncomfortable. But again, if I can get my ego out of the way, which wants to kill me, then I can experience the love of God as it comes through, and it comes through.
Getting sober is difficult. Getting sober in a pandemic is even harder, I think. And you sharing today, I think it's a great way of providing some hope and some inspiration. So I want to thank you for that.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me back on.
Thanks for coming, Chris.
I've enjoyed it, and I love to see you. It's great to see you joining Mike on the microphone and participating. It's absolutely fantastic. You guys are doing a lot of good. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So glad you came. Beautiful.
Thanks so much to Chris for stopping by, sharing his experience, strength, and hope. And thanks to you, the listeners. Truly appreciate your support. If you want to follow us online, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Daily Reflection Podcast, all one word. You can find us on Twitter at Daily Reflector. You can read about recovery on our online blog. It's at blog.dailyreflectionpodcast.com. We've got some new bloggers. Nan F., who shared on the podcast back on February 7th, A Path to Faith, has written an article. She's got another one in the works. There's some other authors getting ready to publish some more articles. Would love to see you there supporting them. That's at blog.dailyreflectionpodcast.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.